Greetings, everyone, and a special welcome to all of our Deadites and Jaegers watching today's show, which features a delectable dyad of director debauchery. Two horror helmers whose eclectic careers have produced some of the more memorable cinema of the past 4 decades. It's Sam Raimi taking on Guillermo Del Toro in this episode of Versus. In one corner, you have Raimi, whose penchant for maximizing low budgets began as a kid making movies around his hometown of Detroit and would go on to bless us with movie franchises like The Evil Dead, Drag Me to Hell, and those movies about the kid who shoots the webs.
My name's the Human Spider.
I don't care, get out there.
No, he got my name wrong.
Get out there, you moron.
In the other corner, it's Del Toro, who came onto the scene with his own low-budget masterpiece, Cronos, before his imagination took us to new heights with Pan's Labyrinth, Pacific Rim, and those movies about that boy from hell. Sure, both of these shot callers love them some horrific visuals, but no one genre can limit two talents like this. And both have high-profile projects on the horizon, with Sam Raimi conjuring his comic book adaptation skills once again for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Guillermo Del Toro adapting the psychological thriller Nightmare Alley. So while they're hard at work, I'm gonna have them compete against each other.
Well, it might not be that bad.
No.
Actually, it might be kind of nice.
Yeah.
Here's how we'll determine a winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer/audience score. Round 3, iconic moments. Round 4, best characters. And then we'll do a wild card round. Something fun, like which director has made the best movie featuring creepy long nails or fishy bath time lovin', or whose movies had the most gallons of fake blood. At least I really hope it was fake blood. It's Del Toro versus Raimi, the Golden Army taking on the Army of Darkness, and at the end of the 5 rounds, we'll be left with the quick and the dead. Metaphorically speaking, no one's actually gonna eat it here, right? This is a safe space. Just a fun little competition where the loser will be dragged to hell. Okay, it's too much. Let's get it on.
Are we gonna talk all night? Because I'm really sleepy.
Round 1, box office. Nothing puts booties in seats and popcorn in mouths quite like the horror genre. And while Sam Raimi and Guillermo Del Toro have proven themselves masters of many different sections of blockbuster, it can't be discounted that their vibrant imaginations tend to lean towards the scarier side of life, or death. And audiences line up in droves to see it. As a matter of fact, these two guys would be pretty even in terms of total box office dollars, if not for that one superhero franchise. No, not you, Blade. I'm talking about Spider-Man and his 2 sequels. Raimi took the reins of Spidey back when comic book movies as we know them today were just cute little babies. If X-Men was one small step for mutant kind, 2002's Spider-Man was a giant leap for moviegoers yearning for the day when their favorite superhero stories could be faithfully told on the big screen. Raimi delivered, as all 3 Spider-Man flicks combined to gross over $1.6 billion at the domestic box office. Spider-Man 2 gets the lion's share of critical love, but it's still that first time we saw Tobey Maguire punk Joe Manganiello that wins the title of box office champ for either of today's directors, with that movie hauling in a total of $662 million. Okay, Blade, you can check into the ballgame now. Del Toro did just the second installment in the Blade trilogy. It was called Blade 2, and it would go on to nab a cool $129 million domestically, which is still his best, highest-grossing effort to date. So yeah, Guillermo has a marvelous mountain to climb if he wants to steal this round from Raimi, but Del Toro does have some additional firepower. Pacific Rim also tops the $100 million mark, and both of his Hellboy flicks got so close, with Hellboy 2: The Golden Army jingling cash registers to the tune of $97 million. It's funny how movies work, because I know a bunch of y'all are screaming, wait until those Evil Dead movies show up. And you're right, but not necessarily in this round. Evil Dead, its beloved sequel, and Army of Darkness all combined to just gross $46 million. But don't worry, Sam Stans, there's one more classic property up Raimi's sleeve. Remember The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, he didn't direct the 1939 classic, but he did do Oz the Great and Powerful, which conjured $265 million at the box office. Really? I barely remember that movie happening. Evil Dead movies are out here begging for change, and Oz's backstory, starring Meg Griffin as the Wicked Witch, that's what's selling tickets? I mean, I do like the dog, but wait, was Toto even in that movie yet? I don't understand the kids anymore. Regardless, that's a huge chunk of change. Meanwhile, Del Toro's Oscar-winning The Shape of Water may have been a celebrated achievement in filmmaking, but its respectable $64 million just doesn't sport the firepower to play with, well, fire. Guillermo Del Toro's total gross here in the States is $630 million, making for a rock-solid $79 million average. But his movies are expensive to make too, so craft services probably had nothing left, so they settled for Czech Cola and Hydrox cookies. Sam Raimi earned a bountiful budget to make them Spider-People movies, and those helped propel his total box office career earnings to $2.26 billion, averaging out to 174 million clams per film. Both Del Toro and Raimi's unique skill sets have resulted in careers filled with genre diversity and captivating storylines and loads of cash. But Sam Raimi getting the keys to one of Marvel's preeminent characters made all the difference here. Will we forgive him for the Spider-Man 3 emo dance sequence? Okay. Will we forget it? Never, ever, never. But he gets the win in round 1, and he's your early leader, 1-0.
Now you pissed me off.
Round 2, Tomatometer/audience score. Well, we've proven that both of our competitors here today are good at making movies that make money. But money can't buy happiness, right? I mean, I'd be willing to give it a shot. In the meantime, what's also really nice is when your peers in the critical world and audiences across the globe like your stuff. Because likes are just as good as cash, right? If you thought a combined $3 billion plus gross for these two fellas was impressive, get ready to be wowed. Both Raimi and Del Toro can brag about having a fresh average for their movies on both the Tomatometer and audience score metrics. In fact, they only have 6 rotten movies between them, and none of those flicks fall below 45% on the Tomatometer. Unfortunately for Sam Raimi, he is responsible for 5 of those 6 rotten movies, but he's also got that killer franchise in his back pocket. No, not you now, Spider-Man. We're talking Evil Dead, baby. The OG and its immediate sequel are at 95% each on Meter de Tomato, and Kirsten Dunst's second outing as MJ is at 93%. Cementing his Ivy League level rep on the Tomatometer is Drag Me to Hell at 92% and A Simple Plan at 91%, but here comes Guillermo Del Toro, whose Hellboy movies land at 81% for the original and 86% for the sequel, but he also has the celebrated Pan's Labyrinth at 95%, followed closely by The Devil's Backbone and The Shape of Water, both of which land at 92%. Meanwhile, Raimi's other comic book fare include the original Spider-Man at 90%, Spidey 3 at 63%, still fresh, and Darkman with an elephant-earning B average at 83%. Speaking of those superhero movies, Blade 2 is the only movie in Del Toro's entire catalog that is rotten at the oh-so-close to fresh mark of 57%. For his career, Guillermo has an overall 80% average on the Tomatometer, which tops Sam Raimi's also impressive 75% average. Despite his many critical darlings, Sam also broke rotten with movies like Oz the Great and whatever at 57%, Crime Wave at 50%, and For Love of the Game at 46%. Wait, For Love of the Game is rotten? The Evil Dead guy made an endearing baseball film, and y'all, Kevin Costner's pitching a perfect game, and you're just gonna ditch him after the 4th inning? I really don't understand kids now. Or maybe I do, because at least FLOTG's audience score is 75%. Which is fresh, which is why it deserves its abbreviation. Keep throwing the heat, Kev! Thanks mainly to the Spider-Man and Evil Deads of the world, Sam Raimi's lifetime average is also fresh on the audience score, clocking in at 68%. And on this scale, it's actually a Del Toro flick that sets the low bar, with 1997's Mimic notching just 37% with the audience. But here comes Pan's Labyrinth, striking again, taking 91% of the audience's love and helping Guillermo to a 70% overall audience score average, which again tops his competitor. Sam Raimi can afford to make a few clunkers and still remain fresh with critics and audiences, and now that I know For Love of the Game has been wronged on the Tomatometer, I'm writing an angry letter to my favorite podcast, Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong, hosted by, well, you know, and then rate and review and say the nice things. Check this show out. Guillermo Del Toro takes round 2 here, and we got us a tied ball game, 1-1.
You serious?
Round 3, iconic moments. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that we have 2 super fresh directors on the show today? Look, I love doing verses, but sometimes I gotta wear a hazmat suit to check these movies out. Not the case with Sam and Guillermo. Why? Well, in order to make a memorable film, it helps to pepper in those iconic moments that stay with us long after the lights go back up. Starting with Drag Me to Hell, which is one long, great moment. We'll get to the Evil Dead. We'll get to the Arachnid Boys, but the opening shriek of the credits from Drag Me to Hell, all the way through the incredibly gory and satisfying conclusion, you gotta check that movie out. The scene at the bank where we meet the old lady, can we even call her old? What's older than elderly? The super ancient lady and her cursed fingernails cast such an eerie cloud over the movie, and then we do a seance, and an evil goat shows up. One long, great moment that entire flick is. But so is Pan's Labyrinth, Whether it's Fawn giving Ophelia a task, or it's just anything with the Pale Man, Pan's Maze is a film designed to give your imagination flights of fancy, inspiration, and occasional terror, and it's one of the reasons why Del Toro is such a great filmmaker. Movies like his 2 Hellboy flicks are packed wall to wall with so much pure imagination, Willy Wonka could write a double album about it. Hellboy 2 The Golden Army has an Angel of Death sequence that really does live up to that description, and the killing of the forest god is a mythology-soaked set piece worth revisiting time and time again. And if you like a director's bold, bloody vision coming to glorious practical effect life, feast your eyes on Evil Dead. What Sam Raimi started with the first film was taken to insane new heights that cemented this franchise as an all-time cult classic. The worldwide reach of moments in Evil Dead 2, like the Evil Awakening, was so profound, it even influenced a young preternatural talent like Guillermo Del Toro. In fact, Del Toro is quoted as saying that Evil Dead 2 Sam Raimi took the camera and liberated it. The stellar POV shots, which is Hollywood talk for point of view, put us viewers right in the center of the action, making multiple moments come to life, or death, as the case may be. The debate may rage over which cinematic Spider-Man is the best. In fact, I believe there's a Versus episode on that very topic. Spider-Ham won, I think. But there's no question that Raimi's trilogy gave us not only memorable moments, but scenes so special they continue to influence the thriving comic book tentpole films of today. We can go action heavy, like the climactic train scene against Doc Ock in Spidey 2, or we can get romantic. Has there ever been a kiss more custom made to win the coveted MTV Movie Awards Best Kiss? You don't dare throw Twilight in there. No, the answer is when Spider-Man kissed MJ in the rain while hanging upside down, and not even Nickelback could make him break character. It's so good, it may be the best kiss I've ever had. And I wasn't even there. I was just a kid shoving popcorn into my face in the front row saying, oh, one day I'll get to do that. Guillermo can counter with a variety of tactics, whether it's the noble sacrifice of Leonard in Mimic, shout out to Charles S. Dutton, the real hero of the movie Rudy, or it's a rousing speech like Idris Elba canceling the apocalypse in Pacific Rim. If the apocalypse is anything like me, it was secretly happy to hear it had been canceled and it simply went back to bed. Even films not as well received, like Crimson Peak, have breathtaking moments of gothic beauty that can only hatch from a mind that is, creatively speaking, one of the best in the world. But Sam Raimi gets the edge here, not just because he defied genre and made me cry with every inning of an aging pitcher attempting to toss a perfect game as his estranged lover watches from an airport bar, but it's simply a combination of his inventive filmmaking techniques that were born out of lower-than-low budget necessity and his ability to take a well-known property like the webby-handed photog and give us brand new reasons to love him. Guillermo del Toro's early effort Kronos has a sweet scene involving a staircase and a scarab, but if we're talking best staircase moments ever, then I gotta once again drag y'all to hell. The hooves are getting louder, and oh my god, the goat can climb staircases. Is it too late to hire Kevin McAllister to rig up some paint cans? Sam Raimi wins round 3 by a razor-thin margin, and he's up 2-1. Round 4, best characters. Moments are great, but they're not as easy to pin up on a wall. You can't sympathize with them or say, hey, that's who I want to be when I grow up. Moments are made because of the characters that experience them. That's not only a senior quote that's 90% of the way there, it's also an expert setup for this round, which will be determined by which director had the better set of players in their respective filmography. Bonus points will be awarded for those parts that were built from scratch. I want the ground up here, no pun intended, Evil Dead hordes. It really means that Spider-Man may not get his full due here, although even Norman Osborn would have to admit that Peter Parker did grow by leaps and tall building bounds in Sam Raimi's trilogy, and we, the audience, cared about him and his aunt throughout the 3 films, even when it got all weird in Spider-Man 3. Seeing the origins of Pete and his family unit, his frenemies the Osborn family, and his pining for MJ make us feel like we're there. We're cheering on the newest superhero to hit the city blocks. We'd been aware of Spider-Man for generations, but these characters and their journeys made the lore feel fresh. But if it's lore you want, look no further than Pan's Labyrinth. Ophelia is a sweet character that we're intrinsically rooting for, but that film also marks one of the many collaborations between Del Toro and his creature muse, Doug Jones. He plays the Pale Man here, and he also appears in such notable roles as Abe Sapien in the Hellboy flicks and the Murpho Thing who got very lucky in a bathtub in The Shape of Water. Which, by the way, is part of the genius of that movie. The moments of love, discovery, longing that occur throughout The Shape of Water matter to us because we want these folks, or things, to succeed in their goals. Freedom to do and love as they please is a prominent theme, but it's brought to life and given emotional weight because of how deftly Del Toro fleshes out the characters. Ash from the Evil Dead films is an absolute legend, and Bruce Campbell is always welcome at a Sam Raimi barbecue. He can pull off exquisite horror action resulting in extraneous amounts of blood and guts, but he can do it with a type of sarcasm and quick wit that we all would hope to have in that situation. For my money, the term groovy is used better in Evil Dead than it ever was at Woodstock. Raimi scores additional points for casting aces like Russell Crowe, Sharon Stone, and a young Leonardo DiCaprio in The Quick and the Dead, and Billy Bob Thornton rightfully earned an Oscar nomination for his turn in A Simple Plan. But since we have Sam and Guillermo here, let's have some fun with monsters. We have all sorts of cool vampires and reapers in Blade 2, and Del Toro also gave us a captivating baddie in Pan's Labyrinth with Captain Vidal, the Tooth Fairies and the Golden Army in Hellboy 2, Thomas Sharp's spooky Ghost in Crimson Peak, and all the cool gigantic things beating the crap out of each other in Pacific Rim make for an impressive resume. Raimi counters well with the Evil Dead Necronomicon. Y'all try to say that 10 times in a row. And obviously, Mrs. Ganesh and her wonderful manicurist in Drag Me to Hell.
Shame.
Okay, fine. I'll give Venom and Sandman their due from Spider-Man 3. Did we mention Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus yet? If I didn't, I should have, because he's great. Spider-Man 2 is still considered an all-time excellent comic book movie, and according to a certain recent trailer, Doc Ock may be back. So, now's a good time to get on his side and book an appointment. But what sways me slightly towards Del Toro here is how invested I get in his films, even when I had little to no context as to who the hell any of these characters were going to be when I entered the theater. Even if Hellboy and his cronies were based on comic book lore, I had no idea what I was in for with those films. Although I did thoroughly enjoy Raimi's Spider-Folk, I was training for that movie my whole life. Pan's Labyrinth, on the other hand, came out of nowhere and gave me all the feels. The Shape of Water is also an emotional gut punch, and Octavia Spencer rightfully deserved her award season bounty for that performance. Sam Raimi gave us Ash and a host of other characters to cheer for, not the least of which is an aging pitcher on the mound for perhaps the last time. But Guillermo Del Toro's films are just too stuffed with interesting characters born out of an endless imagination that spills all over the big screen. Plus, the dude's name in Pacific Rim is Stacker Pentecost. Are you kidding me? It sounds like a quarterback on season 29 of Friday Night Lights, but he's not. He's a robot pilot. And his director wins round 4. We're tied at 2-2.
That is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Jesus.
And now it's time for the wild card round, produce. Full disclosure, I read that like it was about fresh veggies, like the ones on the Tomatometer, and thus I said produce, when in fact I actually should have pronounced it produce, as in the films that either Guillermo Del Toro or Sam Raimi have been producers on. Usually I wouldn't have something as meaningful and important like a wild card round of a beloved show rely on production credits, but these two gents, they're no ordinary executives. They're not producing movies just to collect a paycheck. They get their hands dirty, and they inspire, nurture, and ultimately help make some pretty darn good cinema. Both produced only a few movies before the turn of the millennium, so let's focus on post-Y2K for now, but we might time travel back later, if the TEC allows it. I laid it on pretty thick, did you get it? I hope you did. Sam Raimi leaned into his horror filmmaking expertise to lend a hand to films like Boogeyman and 30 Days of Night as a producer, and the two Grudge films he was an executive producer on. He's also credited as a producer for the Evil Dead remake, and I imagine he was somewhat useful during the making of that flick. And coincidentally, that was his first fresh film as a producer. Since he's done other fresh fare like the two Don't Breathe films and the incomparably fun Swamp Lizard Scarefest, Crawl. Have you seen Crawl? Go check it out right. Stop this show, go watch Crawl, come on back and finish up. Guillermo Del Toro also knows how to pick projects to produce inside of his wheelhouse. Under a Spell and Chronicus are fresh flicks on the audience score, and he was an executive producer of 2007's excellent The Orphanage at 87% on the Tomatometer. And if you needed more creepiness, check out the 75% fresh Splice from 2009. But whereas Sam Raimi has stayed relatively inside his horror sci-fi realm, Del Toro has branched out in the last decade, producing movies you may not consider up his alley, like Rise of the Guardians and Kung Fu Panda 3, both of which are fresh. Raimi keeps giving a strong fight with movies like The Messengers, Possession, and the Poltergeist remake, but all three faltered on the Tomatometer and are what we in the biz call rotten. Del Toro wins the battle of the production Tomatometer rather handily, with an overall 72% average to Raimi's 40%, but perhaps this whole round is going to come down to two movies. So remember back when I hit it at time travel? It was done with a purpose. Nothing on this show is an accident, except that time I wore my shirt in a French tuck for 3 straight inexplicable episodes. The brass told me it was the fashion. I was powerless. But I'm of course referencing the 1994 classic produced by Sam Raimi, Time Cop. There's still time to save Van Damme's wife, who died a decade ago. And if we have any minutes left over, let's do some splits on the counter. Just how we fought bad guys back in the day. Despite its 45% Tomatometer score, someone should do a podcast on that. Time Cop still holds up as an all-time classic, right up there with Hard Target, Double Impact, and Bloodsport. The fact that Van Damme stars in most of those movies, pure coincidence. So what can possibly defeat Time Cop and give Del Toro the win in this round, and thus the match? Well, look, you can't top a time-traveling Jean-Claude Van Damme with someone tougher because that person doesn't exist, but you can get cuter. Witness the heart-melting eyes of Puss in Boots. Look at that little face. Oh, and he's got the little sword and the tiny little boots. Oh, I love him so much. And I'm a dog guy. Molly the Wonder Dog, I hope you're not watching right now. I love you the most, sweetie. Stop hitting your bowl. I fed you enough this morning. The truth is, Del Toro and Raimi are both accomplished producers as well as directors. But if we're going by their entire body of work, I gotta give the edge to Del Toro in this round. His movies cost a ton of money to make, but wow, are they worth it. He wins the round and takes the trophy today.
Because it's right.
Here's the real truth.
You will die!
But let's all bow down before the greatness that is Sam Raimi. The dude made Evil Dead for less money than I put in the parking meter out front of this studio. They still won't validate my parking. And it inspired multiple generations of filmmakers, not the least of which is our winner today, Guillermo Del Toro. Raimi also gave us the template for the modern comic book flick, and the Spider-Man trilogy is still a reliable playbook as to what to do, and maybe not to do, in a stellar superhero franchise. But Del Toro really hasn't missed the mark yet. Even when we thought he might have misfired with Crimson Peak, that turned out to be a beautiful work of art that just didn't fit into the tiny box we had constructed before the film was even released. Guillermo edges out Sam, but that's just one schlub's take. And since Van Damme is currently on his way back through time to change the outcome of this episode, I will quickly say thanks for tuning into the show. Tell your friends, tell your family, and any ghosts that may currently be haunting your creepy house. Hit me up on social media at Mark Ellis Live with your take. And remember, Puss in Boots, he's got his hat and he's got his little belt and the tiny sword. I just want to snuggle the kitty.